Maybe the problem isn't me. Maybe. It's you.
Wait, is this fucking play about us?
When I tell you that the final episode, season, but specifically the final lines of You had me gagged, I mean, they had me hand over the mouth, staring into the abyss, gagged.
Weird concept.
So?
This is quite meta. This is kind of like high art.
And I'm actually a bit confused because the consensus seems to be that the final episode of You was terrible. It's rated really low on IMDb. I've seen people just say, like, for me, the final episode doesn't exist. It ended at episode 9. And I don't know, people seem to think it's really unrealistic, the ending, as if the entire of season 4 didn't exist. But I don't know, it means one of two things. It either means that I have no taste and I'm stupid, or it means that people just love to be haters. Because for me, the whole season 5 was just really classic You. I mean, he was back in the bookshop, he was back in New York, and I just thought it was the perfect ending to You. So that's where I stand on that, if anyone cares. But after that final episode ended and I was sat there on my sofa staring into the abyss, I did think to myself, like, damn, is he right? Are we the problem? Are the obsessive fangirls on BookTok lusting after Joe Goldberg the problem? And I think through a very simplistic lens, if you don't understand dark romance in general, to be honest, and you don't understand the female gaze, then it's very easy to just be like, yeah, Joe Goldberg's right. It's these fangirl romance BookTok girlies that are huge hypocrites when it comes to dangerous men. They call themselves feminists, yada yada yada. But it's not that simple. It's not black and white. And in order to understand the distinction, you first have to understand dark romance and why it appeals to people. So there's this sort of paradox when it comes to dark romance, and that is this idea of safe danger. And I think the main thing you need to understand about dark romance is that it offers this experience of danger in a really controlled, safe environment. It's kind of like why people enjoy watching horror movies or listening to true crime or playing really violent video games where you just go around shooting people in the head. Except in dark romance, you've got this added edge of eroticism and like really high emotional stakes. And this kind of lends into this theory, which is benign masochism, which is basically masochism, but experienced mildly because it's in a safe environment and you're not actually getting hurt. I'd actually kind of argue that adrenaline junkies fall into this category of benign masochism as well. It's kind of like why people like role play being kidnapped or R-worded, because it's a way to experience these really dark things, but your brain knows you're safe, and so there is no risk at all involved. Which I kind of think is the main allure of dark romance in general. These women or readers or watchers can live precariously through these characters and experience things like dominance, power, obsession, stalking, and like violence, whilst just mildly experiencing it and staying safe. And that is kind of just the whole point of fiction. Fiction, to me at least, exists to experience stories and experience things that you would never live in real life. That being said, the main word in all of this that we need to focus on is fiction. And I don't know, for me, there's quite a wide gap in where I draw moral lines between fiction and reality. For some people, that gap is going to be much wider. For others, it's going to be much narrower. And to some people, the line may not exist at all. For instance, like Penn Badgley, Joe Goldberg's #1 hater, which is I find hilarious. But all that says to me is that Penn Badgley is probably someone who looks at fiction fiction and considers it more sort of tales on morality, more sort of like a fable than some sort of fictitious fantasy that you don't have to overly think about in terms of ethics. And I think where you sit on this scale is going to massively impact your view on a show like You and your opinions on people who read and enjoy dark romance. Which leads me on to the next point we need to discuss, which is the importance of context and narrative framing. So let's first address the main argument people seem to have when it comes to You, and that is if Joe Goldberg was not attractive and he wasn't charming and the show wasn't told through this romanticised point of view, it would be like a psychological horror. But that is literally the point. It is told from Joe's point of view. Like, it's pretty privilege at its most potent. Look at Ted Bundy. Why do you think Ted Bundy managed to kill so many women and get away with it for so long? Because no one wanted to believe that he was a killer because he was really good looking and he was really charming. It's the same sort of thing with Joe. You make excuses for him based on his charm and his good looks. And people seem to use that as an argument when it is quite literally the point. If You was told from, say, Beck's point of view and you didn't get Joe's narrative whatsoever, yes, it would be a terrifying horror, but it's not told from that point of view. It's told from Joe's inner monologue, and Joe is really actually very, very funny.
Well, what if some sicko had followed you down here? Touche, bitch. If Opie's gonna bone me, I wish he'd lube up and get on with it. Hello? You? No. Fuck. No, I'm not doing that. I was dissociating! Shut the fuck up, Paco.
But I think almost more importantly, because it's told from his inner monologue, not even just first person, we get his narration, so we know his every thought. We get a really, really biased narrative that he thinks that everything he does is as some sort of vigilante in protection of the people that he loves. And while we're aware that that's not quite true, it allows you to have sympathy for him and empathy that if it was a really distant narrative or a different point of view, you wouldn't get, which again is the whole point of fiction. Maybe it's sort of an excuse, and really, yeah, actually, it is an excuse he tells himself. Especially at the beginning of the show, everything he does, he sort of validates in himself and believes he has to do.
I'm not a bad person. She was going to ruin you, but you're safe now, thanks to me. I just want you to live your best life. It's brave what I do for you. It's not easy. It's hard. Sometimes it makes me sick. I'm brave.
It's exactly the same thing in the TV show Dexter. He is an actual psycho. He is a killer because he has this yearning to brutally murder people. But because it is told in his point of view and we hear his inner monologue and he is some sort of vigilante that is killing other bad people, you root for him. You'll watch a scene where he's murdering someone and you think he's about to get caught and you worry for him. You want to protect him because he is our main character. And when you're watching something with that first point of view narrative, you become that character. And naturally, as that character, we root for them, even if they are a psychotic, stalking lady killer. And I do think as the seasons go by in You and the further you get into the show and the more Joe sort of just murders freely without as much remorse, he sort of loses some of this sympathetic weight. But the point still stands that what he's doing, because we're in his narrative, it feels sort of emotionally earned and necessary. And that allows you to watch someone like Joe Goldberg and root for him and enjoy the darkness and the taboo of this kind of character, which kind of leads into my next point I want to make, which is simply biology and the exaggeration of stereotypes. So, yes, we're no longer Neanderthals or cavemen who are running around trying not to be eaten by wolves or fearing every man that we pass in the forest from a warring tribe. But ironically, kind of as shown by Joe Goldberg, the world is not a safe place for women. And I guess I kind of think one of the reasons that dark romance exists at all is to play up and exaggerate stereotypes of protection. Because in dark romance, you get these like brooding, strong, powerful men who are going to save you, protect you, who are often like of a higher status than you, who are gonna protect you from the evil in the world, even if they themselves are some of that evil. Like 50 Shades of Grey, I think, is a perfect example of this. A very, very troubled guy with a really traumatic childhood, massive abuse, but he's a billionaire who's really good looking, who loves you more than anything else in this world, and who is going to like protect you financially for the rest of your life. It's a fantasy for women, and the fact that it has to be a fantasy is actually quite sad. The reason it's a fantasy is because of men like Joe Goldberg, which honestly the best way you can sum it up is from the show itself.
The fantasy of a man like you is how we cope with the reality of a man like you.
Because yes, this man is bad and kind of evil and he's terrifying, but he's all of these things to protect me, because he is obsessed with me. Because we may not want to admit it, but let's not get it twisted. Like, there is something inherently romantic about a man who is so obsessed with you and so in love with you that he will literally ruin himself and kill for you. And I think Joe Goldberg knows this, and it's part of his manipulation. But that's also kind of why it works on the audience. Joe Goldberg's charm, his extreme romanticism and like obsession with the women he loves leads into manipulation of the audience. And there kind of is this thread with Joe Goldberg, obviously, where yes, he has extreme love and obsession for these women, but he sort of falls out of love at the snap of a finger just as quickly as he falls in love with them, which I guess over the course of the show sort of lessens your appeal to him, which kind of leads into the next point, and I think a narrative that Bronte and Kate, I would say, and that narrative is the I can fix him narrative. And this probably seems like one of the most obvious narratives behind it. And while I agree, I think it's probably because it's the narrative that is most close to reality. The idea that you could take a flawed man and that love, or not just even love, like your love is gonna redeem this man. That's a really intoxicating idea. And it happens in reality all the time. Even Taylor Swift says so. The fact that you can take someone who can't commit or who has trauma and you're gonna be the one that fixes him and makes him commit to you and love you, or in Joe's case, like you're gonna be the one to heal his childhood trauma and make him not murder people anymore. Like, it's a really egotistical lens to look through, but I think it's one that most people in the world have thought at some point or another. The thought that you are a feminine power that's forceful enough to permanently change and fix a dangerous, damaged man. I just think it's just a narrative that will never get old, because it relates to this desire that you are better than everyone that came before. The idea that you could be the one to fix someone increases self-esteem, and we see it all the time in you, especially I think with Bronte at the end, because she knows who Joe is. She hunts Joe down, and yet, but I can fix him. But basically the reason that dark romance thrives and is so popular, and also just why people love things like true crime and documentaries and murder, is because it allows you to experience things that are typically, and in reality, are completely taboo and immoral. Like, it's Bonnie and Clyde, it's Killing Eve, it's every dark romance book, every vampire movie, TV show, book ever made. It lets you experience morals that are grey. Honestly, sometimes not even grey, morals that are jet black in a way that you wouldn't want to in real life. Like, in fiction, you can openly lust after danger, like extreme desire, obsession, a stalking killer, and that's all it is. It's fiction and it's fantasy and it's safe, and people don't necessarily psychologically need to look into it more than that.
How does this feel?
Like I'm getting to live every woman's fantasy.
I'm gonna leave.
Because it's not that women want a murderous stalking killer. It's that women want a man or a partner that loves them so much that they would go to the extreme to love and protect them. And ironically, sort of the darker the world gets, perhaps the darker romance is going to get, because it sort of saves us from ourselves. A bit like Bronte said, the only way to deal with the reality is to create a fantasy where the morals become good and not menacing, especially in this day as well of hookup culture where it's really hard to get commitment, you get ghosted all the time, and finding real love seems kind of impossible. The fantasy that a man will be so obsessed with you that he would kill for you is kind of nice once in a while. And I don't think that's bad. Which kind of just brings us full circle for probably the 5th time in this video to the main point that I'm trying to hammer home, that is, there is a huge, huge difference between fiction and fantasy and reality. There's a big difference between a story where this human teenager stumbles into some sort of fae world where she gets taken over by some dark fae prince and becomes their queen, or a story about a stalking serial killer who's gonna love you so much that he's gonna protect you until like almost his dying breath. And those stories are not reality. And until they become reality, I don't think we need to shame women for enjoying those stories, and we don't need to sort of psychologically analyze people until those stories become reality. Because in reality, women don't want a serial killing man like Joe Goldberg. And if you do, and you're one of these women that like writes fan mail to convicted lady serial killers in jail, okay, then let's start psychoanalyzing these women because they actually do have problems. But when it comes to fiction, people can freely enjoy the fantasy of that fiction without it being that you're a problem. So no, actually, Joe Goldberg, I don't think the problem is us book-loving romance girls. The problem still remains misogynistic men like you. So that's all I have to say on that. In my opinion, fangirls are a huge sector of the economy. Dark romance is a huge subsection of romance fiction, and we should not be psychoanalyzed for enjoying what we enjoy. And I actually say this as someone who doesn't really read or like dark fantasy, but I am a huge fangirl and lover of romance in general, and so I am gonna fight to the death to protect the girls who do love dark fantasy. And if you are one of those girls that loves romance, fiction, and media in general, and if you love dark romance, this is a safe space for you. So you should subscribe and stick around, because on this channel I'm just going to be talking about romance stories and pop culture and media, and if you like that kind of thing, Please do like if you have any other points I didn't cover on the concept of dark romance, especially with sort of fiction versus reality and this narrative, then do leave a comment below because I'd like to know what you think. But until the next one,